The stubborn Taliban. For 3 years, the hardline Islamist group has ruled Afghanistan, turning the clock back on progress in the country. This week, Afghanistan's state-run media stopped broadcasting images of living beings, like people or animals, and instead broadcast nature images, as part of a strict decree issued in August which sparked international outrage. The decree, issued by the Ministry for the Propagation of Virtue and Prevention of Vice, made it illegal for women and girls to show faces in public and sing or speak loud enough that a man who is not related by blood or marriage might hear them.
A squirrel has more rights than a girl in Afghanistan today because the public parks have been closed to women and girls by the Taliban. A bird may sing in Kabul, but a girl may not, and a woman may not in public. This is extraordinary. This is a suppression of the natural law. This is odd.
That was Oscar-winning Hollywood actress Meryl Streep, who weighed into the debate when she spoke in New York at the annual UN General Assembly meeting on September the 24th. While Streep's interjection is helping ensure the world keeps talking about Afghanistan, is it actually contributing to any change on the ground? The international community, namely the United Nations and Western governments, have condemned the Taliban's actions. But behind that condemnation, meetings are taking place with members of the ultra-conservative and religious group, who were last in power in the 1990s. And with their appearance at UN-hosted talks in Doha earlier this year, are the group on their way to greater international recognition as the official government of Afghanistan? This week, we look at how the international community should approach the Taliban. Engage or disengage? How can they be pressured to reverse the draconian measures against women? And how can the Taliban authorities be held accountable for their human rights atrocities without penalising the population? My name is Rosebell Crean, and you're listening to The New Arab Voice. "42 million people live in Afghanistan. Approximately 85% of them live on less than $1 a day. Afghanistan's economy has contracted by a quarter since 2021. The Taliban, though, take little responsibility for the dire economic conditions. They blame it on foreigners, the sanctions implemented by the United States, the European Union, and other nations, which have frozen state assets and made it deliberately difficult to do business with the Taliban.
Afghanistan was always a poor country. It's much poorer now. And one of the reasons for that was that foreign donors and the militaries put in a lot of money, and most of that disappeared all overnight.
Kate Clark is the co-founder and co-director of the Afghanistan Analysts Network, a non-profit policy research organisation.
When the Taliban decided to push for a military victory, it came very quickly, but it also came at a cost. I mean, Afghans were spared a lot of fighting, which was great, but the Taliban had been warned that they wouldn't be supported in the way that the Republic was supported if there wasn't a negotiated deal. The aid has come back online, but it's so much less than the money that was coming into the country beforehand. The economy is about a quarter smaller than it was.
During the lifetime of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan and the US military presence from 2004 to 2021, there was social and economic progress and GDP chugged along, but on fragile foundations. The state relied on foreign aid for 75% of its public spending. When the Taliban swept into power during a disastrous and chaotic withdrawal of US forces, the financial aid dried up and the country's fragile economy collapsed. The economy is still in dire straits and a humanitarian crisis pervades. So, are the Taliban looking for more help from outside?
I would say they blame the economic ills of the country on the foreigners, so on sanctions, on the frozen assets. But I would say it's more fundamental than that. It is the fact that Afghanistan has lost billions of dollars, which used to come into the country unearned, but it was supporting jobs and livelihoods. That's not coming back. And indeed, the amount of civilian aid is declining. And I'd say the economy is the most difficult thing. Jobs are scarce. It's difficult to make a living. a lot of older boys have been taken out of school to try and earn a little bit extra for the household. A lot of women are working at home now, doing embroidery or trying to do something to earn a bit of extra money.
Travel bans, asset freezes, and financial sanctions do not make Afghanistan an attractive place to do business.
The sanctions as waivers, but there's also one of the problems is that banks don't really want to do business with banks in Afghanistan because they fear a future US government might come down hard on them. They don't trust the waivers, basically. So it's really difficult to do, getting money into Afghanistan, doing trade, which is legal under the sanctions rules. It's difficult. It's really difficult to do. So that's a real problem that could be resolved, and that would help.
While the sanctions serve a purpose, they risk harming local business. But these external penalties are dwarfed by the impact of the Taliban's own internal policies. Today, women are banned from working for NGOs, UN agencies, or foreign embassies, except in health and education with permission. Women are no longer teaching at university level, but might be at junior school. Few women still do work in the private sector, but the Boys Club patriarchal networks of Afghan business means it's hard for women to progress. The UN says most companies now prefer to hire men, while places like beauty salons that provided women with income and autonomy were shut down last year. Women's rights alone are estimated to have caused an economic loss of between $600 million to $1 billion since the Taliban takeover. The oppression on women and the assault on their very existence in public have prompted accusations that the Taliban has imposed gender apartheid. The term was first coined by Afghan women during the rule of the previous Taliban regime in the 1990s.
How can we really have a solution for economic crisis in Afghanistan when the Taliban have literally banned half of the population from working and earning their income?
This is Zahra Nada, an Afghan journalist now based in North America. She is the editor-in-chief of Zan Times, a news website covering human rights violations in Afghanistan, with a focus on women and minority groups.
That's one issue. And then the other issue, even for men, there are many industries who cannot work in Afghanistan because the Taliban seen their industry as sinful, as something that should be prohibited. That include, the people who are building music instrument. One example, they cannot work because the Taliban say music is banned in Afghanistan. You are not allowed to make it. And if you make it, they're going to destroy it.
Following the US-led coalition's invasion against Taliban and al-Qaeda forces over 20 years ago, the country set off on a slow but steady path to long-term security, democracy and prosperity. To quote the joint declaration between President Hamid Karzai and US President George Bush in 2004.
Still work to be done, don't get me wrong. But progress is being made, Mr. President, and we're proud of you. Proud of the work you're doing. We talked about the need to stem the narcotics trade. I'm sure the President will comment on this.
In 2006, more than 6 million Afghans turned out to vote in historic elections. For the first time, 68 out of 249 parliamentary seats were reserved for women. Ethnic and religious minorities, like Hazaras or Turkmen, were also guaranteed representation. Half of those who cast votes were women. It marked a major step in social progress in a highly patriarchal society. During those years, girls were at school and university, gaining degrees in law, politics or business. Although conservative customs existed, Afghan men and women could mingle together, listen to music, watch movies, watch American movies, go shopping for new clothes, go to gyms, or visit a beauty salon. Today, these activities are banned, and if defied, Afghans risk prison, where there have been reports of ill treatment, like sexual abuse and torture. The Taliban have also reinstated public punishments such as flogging or stoning. While men can move freely, erasing half the population from being active members of society is having a negative impact on the local economy.
I was working on a story about Afghanistan National Park in Bamiyan, where the locals are saying that their economy is like crashing. They're losing money because the women have been banned from visiting the national park. And not many men came because men used to come with their families. So when their family is not allowed to come, like not many men are coming, At the same time, the stores and the economy was built in a way that the people would come and shop. And when they are not coming, how they will be like, like there's no shopping happening. So this local business are dying because women are banned from visiting this park. So this is just a few examples of, and also, like just to give you another example, the beauty salon were banned. Those were one of the few places where only women were interacting with women and they could make a living. They're all banned. So how can we really get out of this circle of constant economic crisis when the people in power are actually the cause of this economic crisis?
For many Afghan activists, the Taliban's oppressive measures against women weren't shocking, but rather foreseeable. Has the international community been under an illusion that the ultra-conservative rulers might be different the second time round? On September the 27th, the London Embassy of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, the previous government of Ashraf Ghani, closed its doors. Despite previous assertions that the embassy would remain operational, it closed when the Taliban made the decision to cut ties with nations who had not recognised them as the legitimate rulers of Afghanistan. Yet, the group has not been totally excluded from the world stage, and it claims to be ready to rekindle ties with Europe. In August, the chief Taliban government spokesman addressed reporters.
At present, many countries have expressed an interest in engaging with Afghanistan, and we will broaden our engagement in the future. We are going to relaunch our relations with Europe, and we already have relations with countries in the region. We have relations with Islamic and regional countries. We have a limited number of embassies that are not active. Similarly, only a limited number of Afghan missions abroad are inactive or not in contact with us. Most of them are in contact with us. This is a formal commitment.
Last month, the Taliban announced it had opened a consulate in Oman, having previously opened a consulate in the United Arab Emirates. In July, the United Nations was criticised for holding meetings with the group in Doha. It was the third round of talks on Afghanistan. But this was the first time the group had agreed to partake.
So I think we should be asking ourselves, so far what we are seeing, 3 years have passed since the Taliban have taken over Afghanistan. And there's no assumption or illusion about what the Taliban wants to build in Afghanistan. They want to build a gender apartheid. They have been very clear about it. And all the indication and what they want to do is there, and they constantly, implement more restrictions. Women are banned from going to school. That's the basic human rights, the right to education. Women are banned in Afghanistan. So for the UN or any international actors to sit with the Taliban and engage with them, I would ask, in what side do you want to be on? Because the people of Afghanistan see the Taliban as their oppressor. That's pretty much clear in the past 3 years. But if you are going to sit with the Taliban, you're definitely sitting and talking with our oppressors, and you are in many ways enabling our oppressors to continue their existence, to continue oppressing the people of Afghanistan.
Criticism for the Taliban is not universal. Both Russia and China commended the de facto government on the improving security situation in the country and called for the lifting of travel restrictions. And Russia went on to rebuke the Western approach of blaming the Taliban, calling it a road to nowhere. But as rights have been continually degraded in the country, some Western states have questioned the merits of engaging with the Taliban. This differing discourse is reflective of the divisions among the international community on how to approach the group, and the apparent lack of cohesion is weakening its approach. Kate Clark again.
Amongst the Western donors, there are differences. So you've got Norway and Japan on one extreme, who are much keener to, they feel that there should be development aid to help with climate change. UK and US are in the middle. They're sort of pushing more now towards Germany and France on the other end, who really don't want to do anything to support the Emirate. So those are the Western donors. But then you've also got, of course, other powers, regional powers, the neighbours. They've talked about women's rights. They've talked about the need for an inclusive government, but they're more interested in trade and getting those relations off the ground. That you're more like to have ambassadors in place. diplomatic relations. And of course, everyone is also worried about foreign jihadist groups. So I think security and drugs may be the two issues where there could be traction between most of the neighbours and the Western donors, the Emirate. Although on drugs, it's complicated. The Taliban have banned cultivation and production of opium and trade, but the trade goes on.
Yes, security is supposedly better if one ignores the oppressive and violent tactics the Taliban uses against its own people.
There is security now. There is this sort of structural violence within the state that if you do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing, go out without a mahram, if you're a woman with your face uncovered, you may, there's that sort of threat from the state.
In Islamic law, mahram is a male relative who acts as a guardian. It is now illegal for a woman to be in public without a mahram.
But in terms of fighting, IEDs, night raids, rocketing, there's very little of that left. There's a little bit from some of the resistance groups, as they call themselves, and from the bit of the Islamic State that's active in Afghanistan and Pakistan. I'd say they also appreciate not having foreigners telling them what to do. It's the one thing that you do really hear quite, thank goodness those foreigners have gone. So people would like more aid, but they don't, including the Taliban, but they don't really want the foreign interference.
No foreign interference, but in need of help from outside. A conundrum. Not a fragile state anymore, but one beefed up on security and an alleged narcotics crackdown. Can the Taliban really be praised for making the country safe? Afghan human rights activist Shahzad Akbar says no.
Yeah, I think the security outlook is, I understand the security outlook, but I do think it's very short term. Because I see a very strong connection between extreme radicalization and prevention of women and girls from education. Imagine if you, and the kind of education also matters. So what are you raising? You're raising a nation of people. What Taliban are envisioning is that in 10 years from now, they will be elected as leaders of Afghanistan by popular vote, because people start to believe that it's haram, it's unacceptable for girls to attend schools beyond 12. Once they're 11, they should stop going to school.
Living in exile, Shahzad co-directs Afghan civil society organisation Rawadawi and is currently an Academy Fellow at Chatham House in the UK. For the past 2.5 years, she has been campaigning for the Taliban to be tried at the International Court of Justice for violations of the Convention on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, known as CEDAW. It would be the first time that violations of the CEDAW are investigated at The Hague.
What basically they mean is that they will communicate to the Taliban about violations of CEDAW, and following a period of negotiations, they might take the case to the International Court of Justice. So this has been one of the several accountability demands of the Afghan human rights community, that the Taliban's violations of CEDAW to be looked at by the International Court of Justice. And of course, it's with all accountability measures, it's hard to say that this will translate to reversal of the laws, the oppressive laws by the Taliban, but it will bring further attention to the situation in Afghanistan, and it will bring the highest court, the International Court of Justice, to consider the situation in Afghanistan from the perspective of CEDAW. This will be the first time, actually, CEDAW will be used in this way.
On September the 26th at the UN, 4 countries, Australia, Canada, Germany and the Netherlands, announced they were pursuing legal action against the Taliban for breaching the CEDAW. Another prominent female Afghan and former politician, Fawzia Koofi, said that the world had ignored the link between global security and human rights violations. She said hope and education are the antidote to war and extremism. She spoke to the Nobel Peace Conference in Switzerland in September.
The world has ignored and tried to deliberately de-link the relationship between women's rights and security, between human rights and security. We think security is a standalone issue, and only by protecting our borders from a security perspective, we can secure our nation. This is a wrong perception.
The United Nations has continuously talked about how to move forward with the country and improve the situation for women. But while there has been lots of talking, there has been little real pressure exerted on the group to change the reality on the ground. Countries have been forming relations, negotiating business deals too. China never really ended ties. In 2022, it shared a bilateral trade deal with Afghanistan worth $595 million, rooted in rare earth mining. A cross-border electricity construction project with several Central Asian countries just restarted. The Central Asia-South Asia Electricity Transmission and Trade Project, known as CASA 1000, has restarted building work, which will see power supplies be transmitted to Pakistan via Afghanistan. And the World Bank is helping with the finances.
I think my greatest grievance is against the United States. I have extreme grievance. I can't even talk about it. But then quickly after that, it's the Muslim majority countries and Muslim leaders. Because I think what Taliban are doing is not only at the service to the people of Afghanistan, to the future of Afghanistan, they are paralyzing our future, they are destroying our future. You're looking at a country that 10 years from now will not have female health workers. Women will be dying of curable, preventable diseases in their homes because they're not allowed to go to a male doctor and there are not female doctors and healthcare providers. This is what Taliban are doing to our country. They're trapping us in a cycle of endless poverty and needs where we just have to stand in lines for UN to give us food. This is what they're doing. But the world is letting it happen. And Muslim countries are letting it happen under their name, their religion's name, Islam.
The United Arab Emirates accepted a Taliban-appointed diplomat as the ambassador of Afghanistan in August, with the consulate opening in Abu Dhabi. Previously, in 2022, the wealthy Gulf states had been awarded contracts to run operations at Kabul airport.
In terms of Muslim countries that could be influential, of course, Pakistan could be influential, although their relationship with Taliban has changed rapidly, let's say. Qatar could be influential. I mean, Taliban have property in Qatar. Taliban have family members living in Qatar. There is a degree of leverage.
The likes of China, the UAE, Oman, and the stans of Central Asia are at odds with Western states who've refused to normalise relations until the group reopens high schools and universities to women and girls.
And then Central Asian countries are just doing business with the Taliban. Fine, do business, but do it with some conditions. Just go there, take a big group of Uzbekistan, for instance, is very involved, of the university teachers and scholars, and go to Taliban and say, look, we beg you, we plead to you, please, open the schools, open the universities. They're not raising these issues.
Zahra Nada also thinks that Muslim nations need to call out the Taliban's treatment of women in the name of Islam.
But obviously, it's not Islam. It's a very extreme interpretation that comes from the mind of misogynist mullahs who just been, socialized in religious school and have not seen a lot outside that village and outside the madrasas. But that's not the people of Afghanistan. That's not the culture of Afghanistan. So first there's a need for Muslim countries to step out and to really deny the Taliban and say that what the Taliban does is indeed against religion. It's nothing in religion that would say women don't have the right to exist, women don't have the right to be social being or get education. So there's a need for them to work together, and instead of remaining silent or trying to facilitate the Taliban, there should be a stand by these countries and reject the Taliban and say what you do is indeed against religion.
So is penalising the group through isolation the best mechanism to press for change and reverse what has been lost?
I think one of those ways is to be conscious that the Taliban cannot exist by itself alone, be isolated and not have any support. They have managed to exist the past 3 years because there are countries, there are support that they're receiving. They're receiving definitely funding. They're receiving, ways of engagement, and there are countries who are more than happy to open the embassy and have the Taliban representative in their country. So these are some of the things that are at the moment enabling the Taliban. I think the way to approach this is to see the issue as a crisis for human rights, as a crisis for women's rights globally, and it needs a very concrete action. And part of that action should be done by Muslim majority countries.
On the flip side, Some would argue that dialogue paves the way for deals, concessions, and ultimately is a form of peace building. This is certainly how the United Nations framed it when they were criticised for conceding to the Taliban's demands during the Doha talks in July, which meant that no Afghan women were at the table, nor any civil society activists. The hardline rulers agreed to only discuss two items: economic issues, in particular the question of support to the Afghan private sector, and counter narcotics. But this was criticised by human rights defenders, who said the absence of women's issues was an unnecessary concession. Although Rosemary DiCarlo, the Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, said the talks were in fact a win for diplomacy. But was there any outcome to the discussions? Only to keep talking.
Otherwise, I just want to argue that 3 years have passed. There was many attempts to engage with the Taliban. There many attempts have been made to appease the Taliban. But it's not going to change the Taliban. They have said it once. They have said it more and more over the past 3 years, that no matter what you're going to do with us, we are not going to walk back on the way we are approaching things, on building of gender apartheid, on removing and making women invisible from society. We are not going to walk back on that. So this is again up to most of these countries to be able to see the Taliban for what they are, and not trying to put their own kind of politics and policy at the center, and trying to think of like how the Taliban can serve my interest in Afghanistan, how I can work with the Taliban to reach my goals, because the Taliban, it is a danger to the world.
While pushing for dialogue, the United Nations is adamant that until the group reverses its restrictions on women, they won't have a seat at the General Assembly. And for their parts, the Taliban have always rejected accusations that they're violating human rights or practicing gender discrimination. After the UN General Assembly meeting in New York at the end of September, Hamdullah Fitrat, a Taliban government spokesperson, said human rights are protected in Afghanistan and no one is treated with discrimination. Unfortunately, an attempt is being made to spread propaganda against Afghanistan based on the say of a few escaped women. The month before, Richard Bennett, UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Afghanistan, not an easy job, had his visa blocked by the Taliban authorities. They accused Bennett of, quote, spreading propaganda about women and girls' rights. Bennett spoke to the UN Human Rights Council in June.
And we have pointed to the need for more exploration of gender apartheid, which is not currently an international crime, but could become so. And we have noted that it appears if one applies the definition of apartheid, which at the moment is for race, to the situation in Afghanistan and use sex instead of race, then there seem to be strong indications pointing towards that.
The Taliban say that social issues, like women's rights, are internal issues.
There is no doubt that the Islamic Emirate is willing to have positive interactions with the international community. But one thing we should make clear is that social issues, the internal issues of the people of Afghanistan, should not be associated with humanitarian aid, engagements, recognition and other such things, and these should not be used as political tools.
But underneath all the diplomatic tit-for-tat, does the Taliban need official recognition as the government of Afghanistan? Analysts say their goal is to implement a theocratic rule by enforcing a strict, extremist version of Islam, with little interest in supporting the impoverished population, the majority of whom are in need of humanitarian support. The international community, through the auspices of the UN, believe that engagement is the best path. But do the Taliban even want to interact with the international community, most of whom live lives at odds with their strict Islamic teachings? Do they care about improving socio-economic conditions for their subjects? Back to Shahzad.
I think some of them care about these things, right? Some of them care about serving the Afghan public and sustaining their own government. Thus sustaining their own government. I do think that the direction that we see, unfortunately, is the direction where those who are extremely ideologically driven, who think it's not my business as the government to serve Afghan people, my business, God will feed them. It's my business as the ruler to ensure that Afghans are implementing in their daily life my version of religion. That they are praying 5 times, they're keeping the beard, the length that they should, that women are dressed the way they should, that people are not listening to music, all these things. So they see their job. It's an idea of governance where the role of the ruler is to ensure that the population follows the religious ideology. And then everything else is left to God, including feeding people and vaccination for babies.
The group recently announced it was suspending polio vaccinations for children because of security concerns and the role of women in administering the vaccines. Afghanistan is one of the last countries in the world still struggling with the deadly disease.
So if you're dealing with people who have this mentality, why is your theory of change that bringing them to Doha 3 times and conceding to their views will necessarily change the situation on the ground? I think for us, our theory of change as Afghan human rights activists, as Afghan women rights defenders, is empower the voices and the people and the views that are saying, no, this is not what we expect from our government. What we expect from our government is services. We are Muslims. We have been Muslims for a long time. We know how to be Muslims. We don't need an invisible man in Kandahar to teach us how to be Muslim. We need you to give us electricity, water, to build that collective demand and power to hold the Taliban to account, rather than waste your time trying to change the Taliban, because they won't change unless there's pressure from within Afghanistan as well as internationally in the region.
So, is there pressure from within? The Taliban claim the country is stronger and more united than ever, but there are still brave people defying their rulers. Whether it is secret schools for girls, journalists taking great risks to report on human rights violations, or women singing in the street, there are pockets of the population striving for change. If there are boots on my throat and fists hitting my mouth, I am standing steady, sings one Afghan woman on the streets of Kabul, bravely defying the Taliban's new law. Courageous actions like this stand in stark contrast to the endless statements but little results from the part of the international community. Negotiations are the oldest form of diplomacy, but it has to come with conditions and mechanisms for recourse. The Taliban waited 20 years for the Americans and international forces to leave. They aren't going away anytime soon. And while they remain as the country's rulers, it is imperative that those living under their control are not forgotten. This episode of The New Arab Voice was written and produced by me, Rosebell Crean. Our theme music was by Omar El-Fil. The New Arab Voice will be back shortly. Until then, you can find all our previous episodes on all major podcast platforms. You can also check out our social media accounts, both at TNA Podcasts, for additional content. And you can email us, podcast@newarab.com. You can subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And you can also rate and review, which helps us spread the word. Don't forget to follow The New Arab on Facebook, X and Instagram for all the latest news, analysis and opinion from the region.